Have you ever played a game that you loved only to learn that it got terrible reviews? That happened to me with quite a few games, and it blew my mind. Like, how could these games that I loved so much get so badly reviewed? Well, in this video, I'll be sharing 10 other great JRPGs that were really poorly reviewed. Also, if you enjoy JRPGs and want to stay up to date with the latest news, reviews, and other fun videos just like this, then be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. So to start off, we have Harvestella, which has a Metacritic score of 73. Now that's not that bad, all things considered, but considering how beloved this game is, it seems kind of low. Like, pretty much anyone I talk to just can't shut up about this game. Like, all my fellow JRPG creator friends love this game, talk about it all the time. It's kind of like their version of like me with Sakura Wars and Tokyo Xanadu. Now, I haven't actually finished the game. I did play the demo, which was really rough. There were some cool things about it, but apparently they adjusted a lot from the demo, like how long time goes on the world map and stuff like that. But after they adjusted it, apparently people really loved it. Now, why was it reviewed so poorly? Well, it was pretty much a Switch exclusive. I think it's also on PC. It scored really low for its visuals and performance on Switch, and it also had some pretty stiff combat, and it wasn't as much of a farming sim as people were expecting. And plus, it looked a little budget, kind of like a AA game. But what makes it great? Why should this game be more beloved? Well, the story is really interesting. There's this plague called the Quietus that's destroying crops. You've lost your memory, and you're regaining your memories, and as you regain your memories and peel back the layers of the story, it's really compelling. And also, there's an unexpected twist that I'm not going to ruin here, that every time I hear about it, I'm like, that's what this game is about? That's interesting. And while the actual like graphical fidelity of the game isn't great, the actual art style is incredible. Just walking around the world, the environments, the character designs, they look really great. And the character portrait art, I love. I really love that kind of painterly art style. It looks incredible. There's also a lot of variety in combat. Like, you can choose different classes. They all unlock throughout the game. There's a really cool upgrade system. There's a large variety of environments, and overall the gameplay loop is just fun. And for someone that hasn't played this game, I should take my friend's advice and actually start playing it. Now, when Tales of Xillia 2 came out, the scores made a lot of sense, but as time goes on and I look at the Tales series as a whole, it seems pretty low to me. But why did it score low? Well, this game was infamous for reusing a lot of assets. Obviously, it's a sequel, so use a lot of the same characters, animations are very similar, so there's not a ton of new environments. There are some, but overall it felt very much like they were just trying to knock a game out as quickly as possible. Also, the protagonist is silent, the first for the Tales series, and that's locked until you beat the game. Like, once you beat the game, the character does get a VO, but it's kind of an annoying way to do that. Like, once you beat the game and you figure out what's going on, you understand it, but I felt like it was done a little bit clunky. Also, it's annoying how they gate off the story. Like, the main character you play, Luger, has a medical bill that he needs to pay off, and so the game gates off progress in the story until you pay off certain payments. To me, that just kind of felt like bad design. But why is it great? Why should it be more beloved? Well, it has one of the best twists in a Tales game. Like I said, it's told a bit clunkily, but once you see it, it's really interesting and really fantastic. It also has some of my favorite characters in the entire series. I mean, Alvin, he's kind of your Han Solo-esque character. He's very charming, witty, funny, but also you have this character, Elle. The whole thing is you're trying to help her find her father, and she's just so cute, and she is like trying to do her best, and you can't help but love her. She's got such an adorable design. I really loved her as a character, and it might be the best iteration of the Tales action combat system. The main character, Luger, can swap between different weapons on the fly, which is so fun to just swap between. It feels really good. I mean, he also has this meter that he can build up, and he can transform. He's kind of like he's going Super Saiyan, and he does tons of damage. It's just really fun to play this game. Not to mention multiple endings that were very memorable. I was kind of shocked at how some of the endings ended. So I hope that when they eventually do the Xillia remaster, that maybe they do a collection with both games, because Xillia 2 definitely deserves some love. Now, when Eternights came out, I loved it. I was one of the biggest champions of it. I wouldn't shut up about it. I got to preview it, I reviewed it, and I got the chance to put mine out on embargo day with everyone else's reviews, and I watched some of my fellow JRPG creators' reviews, but they didn't put scores on there, so I was like, okay, well, I have no idea what the scores are going to be. And while the PC version has a higher score at 75, on PlayStation, it's a 68, which is kind of shocking to me. Now, it's scored low because it's a little bit derivative of Persona, like it's kind of that same same loop of being on a calendar, dating system, going through the dungeons, and it's not noticeably better in any way. In fact, a lot of the aspects of Persona are stripped out because it's a much smaller game. And the combat isn't turn-based, it's action, which is cool, but there's a lot of timed button presses that you have to do, and you have to dodge at just the right minute, and sometimes that can be a little frustrating. And as interesting as the art style and the overall design is, it can be really dark and hard to see what's going on at times. And the actual character models are pretty simple and don't look great, despite having actual good design when you see the 2D character art. And the music is just kind of forgettable. It's more vibey and it's not very melodic. You don't hear a lot about the music from this game. It's also relatively short, which I enjoyed. It's only like 9-10 hours, which I think is good, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But people want a bigger adventure, and the side content is not nearly as good as it is in Persona. I mean, basically, you have this one mini game where you have to try to find an item within a time limit, and if you do, you get some boost with your character that you're with or some stats for the main character. But why is it great? Why should it be more beloved, or why does it deserve better scores? Well, to me, the characters in your party are really, really compelling. They all have really interesting, diverse backstories. I loved getting to know each one. I could really relate to a handful of them, and depending on which girl or which person you decide to be with at the end of the game, it impacts the end of the game. It's very, very different, which I thought was really cool. It gives you a big incentive to replay the game. Plus, I just thought the game loop was fun. If you like Persona, you're gonna like this. There's doing the dungeons, talking to characters, building up social link, and a small handful of different side activities. Now, I gotta be honest, I love Persona. It's my favorite series of all time. I'm a sucker for games that emulate that formula. Plus, this game takes place in Seoul, where I currently live, so it kind of gets a few brownie points with me, but I just don't think it deserves a 68. That's brutal. Another one that really shocked me when I saw the scores and the responses that people had to this game is Rune Factory 5. Now, this is also a game that I reviewed on embargo day, so I didn't really check other people's reviews, and it scored a little bit higher when it came out on PC later. It has a 74 right now, but the Switch version is a 68. Now, most of the scores are low because of the technical issues. On Switch, it just runs so terribly. It has a pretty poor frame rate. Like, I don't think it ever hits 30 solidly, especially in combat. So I totally get that. And a lot of people felt like it didn't evolve the formula enough, especially in a post-Stardew Valley world. It needed to do more to stand out. And while the combat is interesting and tolerable, it's not amazing. And I also saw quite a few people frustrated that some of the more interesting characters weren't romanceable, which I totally agree with, by the way. But why is it great? Why did I enjoy this game? Why do I feel like I'm standing alone on this hill cheering on Rune Factory 5? Well, to me, I love these kind of farming sim games. And to me, Rune Factory 3 and 4, their visual style is very simple, very basic. So I love that it brought the series into a big 3D world, this huge town to explore, all these dungeons. I absolutely love that. The actual art style is incredible. I love the character portraits. I just loved how colorful the world was. So many bright colors. I really, really enjoyed that. It just has a really cozy, charming vibe. I just loved existing in this world. And while there are certain characters that you can't romance, the characters that you can talk to and meet and interact with were all really great. And overall, I just loved the game loop of, doing a little farming, talking to people around town, going to the dungeons. I really enjoyed it. And I gotta be honest, visuals do a lot for me. So the leap from 4 to 5 was absolutely massive. And so that really impressed me. So I could kind of see past the performance issues. So overall, I think I might be one of the few people that actually liked Rune Factory 5, but I think it got done dirty with its review scores. Now, another game that was reviewed low that I can kind of get is Star Ocean: The Divine Force, currently sitting at a 68 Metacritic score. Now, this game was ambitious, but it didn't always hit what it was going for. And some of the reasons I saw why it was scored low was it felt old. Like, it was very tropey with its characters, especially with its level design and mission design. Like, it doesn't do anything super new and ambitious. A lot of the reviews I read said it felt old or outdated. The story wasn't super interesting, and visually it just doesn't look great. It feels very budget. Like, the actual quality of the character models is not great. It almost looks like a PS2 game in some ways. Just there isn't a lot of detail on the character models. But why is it great? Why does it deserve higher scores, or at least people appreciating it more? Well, for one, I love the Duma system. So this is the ability for the character to kind of like fly around the environment. And I love stuff like that. I love games that give you dynamic ways to explore the world. So there are these like red crystals that are constantly scattered all over the world. They're like on rooftops. There's like platforms all over the place. So I loved going all over the place to do that. That just kind of scratched a very specific itch for me. The combat was pretty solid. Sometimes it can be a little chaotic, but there were just so many playable characters characters. Like, the variety is pretty incredible by the time you finish the game. So there's definitely a character that you'll like. And in fact, there's one character that can't even attack and only heals, which I thought was interesting. Also, I'm a big town guy in JRPGs. I love getting to towns and exploring them and see what they have to offer. And there were a lot of really cool towns in this game. Like, there's a really fantastic seaside town with a big ship, and you can explore the rooftops of buildings. So I don't know, I love the towns in this game. It had pretty solid music, especially the battle theme that I'm probably playing in the background right now. It's just rocking. I loved any time I got into combat so I could play that song. Now, don't get me wrong, it's not amazing. I can totally understand why its scores are a little bit lower, but to me, I think it's better than a 68. I think it's a little low and definitely worth checking out if you haven't already. Now, the scores for Stranger of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin straight up don't make sense to me. With some of the scores so far, I can definitely understand, but with Stranger of Paradise, a 66 seems ridiculous for this game. Yeah, the story presentation is a little cringe with all the chaos stuff, but other than that, the game is awesome. Going through some of the scores, why it scored so low, like particularly I'm looking at the Xbox version. I guess there were some technical issues at launch. I don't really remember that, but apparently there were. And I think this game was a victim of expectations because they kind of pitched this as a remake to Final Fantasy 1. And from that perspective, it's definitely not a great remake of Final Fantasy 1. Like, the story is kind of silly, especially with all the Jack and the chaos stuff. And the characters I just didn't think were very memorable. Overall, the story is not that great, but why it is great is its gameplay. I think from that perspective alone, it's spectacular. One of the best action combat systems I've played. It's sort of like they took what they learned from Nioh and made it a little bit easier. It's like a fast-paced, kind of Souls-like. I know people like to throw that term out there for this game, but that's just because it's a little bit challenging. It's very parry and block heavy, but there's just a huge variety of classes to choose from that all have very different combat and play styles. Like, if you like the job system in Final Fantasy games, you're gonna love this because there's so many ways to unlock and mix and match classes. It's just so much fun. Plus, you can do online co-op and play with your buddies. So to have this awesome action system and you can play with other people, so cool. Some really fantastic bosses, sick music, like taking classic Final Fantasy games and giving them like a rock touch, kind of Black Mages-esque in a way for anyone that knows what the Black Mages are. Honestly, you probably could just skip the story and enjoy it for its gameplay. And it's really cool for Final Fantasy fans to get a different take on the series. So if you see it on sale and you haven't played this game already, definitely play it because it deserves your time. Now, for Atelier Rorona, I have a lot of fond memories of this game. I remember when I first got my PlayStation 3, it was one of the first games I played because this was when I was getting back into gaming after not playing games for a very long time, and I wanted to see what the latest and greatest was for JRPGs. And as we know, the PlayStation 3 didn't have a lot of great ones, but one of the first I picked up was Atelier Rorona. But when I went back to look at scores, I was really surprised to see it had a 65 Metacritic score. And so it scored low because it's kind of repetitive. I mean, basically the game is just you get a quest from the castle, you go fulfill it, you do it again, rinse and repeat. So it can kind of feel repetitive. People also didn't like the deadlines. They felt it was kind of restrictive in that sense. I saw a lot of reviews comment on bad dialogue, and I don't necessarily remember the dialogue being bad, but maybe I'm just sort of like numb to the way JRPGs do their dialogue and voiceover. So maybe I'm just numb to that. People said you spend a lot of time in menus. I mean, this is a crafting game where you're collecting stuff and making stuff, so I get that. But I also feel like people were expecting something big and expansive like Final Fantasy, and it just wasn't that. But why is it great? Why should you play it? Well, I think the art style is gorgeous. Like this sort of watercolor art style, like all the character models look incredible. The character portrait arts look great. Even the environments look great. Like as small as the environments are, I just think they look fantastic. I mean, it's just such a charming, cute, cozy game. And that goes from everything from the music to the characters. And I found the game loop very addictive. I never really had a problem meeting the deadlines. I just thought like, oh, it's just sort of a thing to keep you playing the game. I didn't really find it that hard or that restrictive. Now later they did sort of remake this game and they updated the character models, and it's probably the best way to play it, especially because it's not limited to the PS3 hardware. But to me, I still found the PS3 original to be fantastic, and however you can play it, definitely go check it out. Now, Wild Arms XF, aka Wild Arms Crossfire, is a game that I never played, which is a little surprising to me because I was really into the PSP back in the day. And this is a strategy RPG spin-off from the Wild Arms series, and weirdly enough, it's the last Wild Arms game that was ever made. And like I said, I never even heard it before making this video, but it looks awesome, and apparently it got really low review scores when it shouldn't have. Right now it's at a 64 Metacritic, and it scored low mostly because the mission mission objectives. From what I could tell, they're very like trial and error. Like they're not just kill every enemy on the map. It's sort of doing something interesting like defending a point or trying to not be detected by certain guards and stuff like that. And apparently it's very reliant on specific character classes. So you could go into the mission and you're like, well, this is impossible. I have to start over. And a lot of people ultimately didn't find that trial and error aspect fun. And apparently it's got some really bad voiceover. There's also this really unforgiving VP mechanic where your life drains if you use up this resource. And so at some point late into battles, you could just be losing HP just because of this like arbitrary mechanic. But why is it great? Why should you actually play this game? Well, instead of squares, it's got hex grids, so it kind of adds a different layer of strategy to this game. I think it has a really great art style, like the character models and just the way the pixels look on the actual gameplay. I think it looks fantastic. The music sounds incredible. And as annoying as some of the trial and error stuff can be, I think it's cool that there are unique objectives, because as someone that's played a lot of strategy RPGs, there's basically only a handful of mission types. It's either beat one specific boss, beat everyone, or defend a point. And so to hear about a strategy RPG that has really unique mission objectives, I think that's kind of cool. And honestly, after researching this game, I really want to give it a try and see if the objectives really are as annoying and frustrating as people say. Now, for the DioField Chronicle, I kind of get it why it scored so low, but personally, I really loved it, so I'm going to go to bat for it any chance I can. And it was better received on PC with a 71 Metacritic score, but still 63 seems ridiculous. Now, this is a real-time strategy RPG where things happen in real time, but you can pause the action and give commands. You have kind of a relatively small squad, like 4 characters at most, and it has a really cool visual style. But why did it score low? On PC, it said the PC controls were pretty bad, which I guess makes sense since it was probably made with controller in mind. I guess people didn't like the bland, generic political story, and the mission objectives were repetitive and pretty easy, and that part I actually don't disagree with, but to me that didn't really bother me. Why I found it great is that it's shockingly addictive. I actually liked that the levels were kind of short. It felt really addictive to just pop in, do a 5 to 10 minute mission, upgrade your characters, maybe do some side objectives, maybe do some of the social link-esque stuff where you can talk to your party members and then go do another story mission. I think one of the more annoying things about strategy RPGs is how long the battles can be. It can be really annoying and grating and frustrating, especially if you make a mistake and then you have to start all the way over. And I also like that there's not these big, complicated strategic decisions. It's like, okay, I gotta really fine tune my troops and put them in very specific areas around the map. Here, it's more about micro decisions. And it's like, when do I want to implement that move? Because everything's on a cooldown timer. It's like, okay, I got these guys coming. You have to attack at just the right time. I don't know. To me, it just felt much more rewarding. Now, admittedly, the game is a little easy, especially in the end game. Once your characters get leveled up and they unlock all their best abilities, some characters get overpowered and they just can destroy everybody on the map. But some levels can still get pretty hard because it's not just about pure raw power. And honestly, the ending is pretty wild and begs for a sequel. I was like really surprised at how invested I was with the story by the end. And also, Waltequin has to be one of my favorite new characters created in the last like 5 to 10 years in gaming. She's just so interesting, so compelling. I mean, I always say she reminds me of the Joker. She likes to invoke chaos. She actually got her own free DLC story campaign, which wasn't great, admittedly, but still, you can't complain about free content. And I ended up getting the Platinum Trophy. It was a really fun Platinum to get. So if you have seen this game on sale and you're like, I've heard bad things about it, give it a try because I think the DioField Chronicle is fantastic. All right, last up on this list is a game that you probably haven't heard of, and that's Dragon Valor. It was a very obscure PS1 JRPG back in the day, but back in like 2010, 2011, I was really into collecting every PlayStation 1 JRPG. So as I was going through them, I booted this one up, like, I had never heard of this. Let me just see what it's all about. And I was really surprised at how much fun I had it. And I was really surprised to see how low it scored. Right now, it's got a 57 Metacritic. That's kind of ridiculous for how much fun I had with it. But people scored it low because it was pretty short. Like on How Long to Beat, it says it's about 7 to 8 hours. They said the story was kind of bland and it's not that visually impressive. Now you have to remember, like, put yourself back in the day and age when this came out. This was after games like Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VIII came out. So all other games were going to be compared to that, whether that's fair or not. And this was the first 3D generation. So a lot of the games with like poor 3D character models kind of got judged harshly. But why is this game great? Well, to me, what this game felt like was, imagine if Ease was a PlayStation 1 game, and that's what it is. It's like a fun hack and slash action combat game with some platforming. And I actually thought the story was kind of interesting. It's sort of this lineage story where like you play as a character for like a little while, and then you play as their son, and then you play as the next character's son, and so on until the story ends. I'm like, that's kind of cool. And especially in an era where we have games like Romancing Saga 2, where that's a big part of that game, I feel like players now would enjoy it way more than maybe back in the day. Now, honestly, don't get me wrong, it's not gonna like blow you away. It's not like this amazing hidden gem that's gonna be one of your favorite games of all time, but I feel like it's way better than a 57. Like, that seems ridiculous to me. Again, as I was playing through the catalog of PlayStation 1 RPGs, I just remember that one really standing out and thinking that's really unique, and I'm kind of surprised I never heard about it before, and I was really surprised that it got scored so poorly. Now, these were just some poorly reviewed games that were great. You might even call them hidden gems. Now, to see 10 of the wildest hidden gem JRPGs from 2024 that you don't want to miss out on, definitely watch this video next.